Daniel loved his home for one simple reason: peace. He had worked hard to afford the Lakeview property, and every morning he woke up with the comfort of knowing it was his sanctuary. But one Thursday morning, that peace was shattered. He stepped out with a mug of coffee in hand and froze. A shiny SUV, one he recognized all too well, sat across his driveway, blocking him in completely. It was Karen's. She was his neighbor, and unfortunately, she also sat on the HOA board. Her reputation was infamous: bossy, entitled, and dismissive of anyone's concerns but her own. Daniel set his coffee down and knocked on her door. Karen opened it, already smirking. "It's just temporary," she said, waving her hand as though his frustration was trivial. "I'll move it later. The board allows me flexibility." That was the first red flag. Later turned into hours. Hours turned into the next day. And by the weekend, Karen's car had become a fixture across Daniel's driveway. Each time he asked her to move it, she brushed him off, smugly reminding him of her position on the HOA. Daniel wasn't just annoyed. He was trapped. He couldn't leave for work on time, deliveries were canceled, and even guests had to park blocks away. The worst part was Karen's attitude. She'd laugh, sip her wine in the evenings, and call across the street, "If you don't like it, take it up with the board." One night, as Daniel walked past the SUV, something caught his eye. A sticker in the corner of the windshield, the kind issued by banks when the vehicle wasn't fully paid off. That tiny detail lit a spark in Daniel's mind. For the first time since this nightmare began, he felt the edge shift in his favor. What Karen didn't realize was that she had parked, more than just her car in his driveway. She had parked the perfect opportunity for payback. Daniel decided to try civility first. He walked over to Karen's house that evening, calm but firm, and asked her again to move her SUV. "Karen, I can't even pull out of my driveway. Can you please move it?" Karen leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and smirked. "I'm on the board, Daniel. I have certain privileges. If you're that desperate, you can park on the street like everyone else." Her tone wasn't just dismissive, it was dripping with arrogance. Daniel's patience thinned, but he kept his composure. "Privileges don't give you the right to block someone's private property." Karen's laugh carried across the yard. "Oh, relax. It's just a car. You're overreacting." Then she shut the door in his face. By the next morning, her SUV was still there. In fact, she seemed to make a point of keeping it longer, almost like a twisted power play. Neighbors whispered about it during morning walks. One even stopped by Daniel's porch and said, "We've all had run-ins with her, but this is too much." Daniel decided to turn the tables. If Karen wanted to play games, he would play by the rules, but his rules would be sharper. He pulled out his phone and started documenting everything. Every blocked morning. Every time Karen dismissed him. Every HOA message where she invoked her authority. The situation escalated when Daniel brought the issue to the HOA board formally. He showed the photos, the timestamps, and even the messages. But instead of siding with him, the board, stacked with Karen's allies, turned on him. "You're being disruptive, Daniel," one member said sternly. "We suggest you stop harassing Karen. It was the final straw." Daniel realized the HOA wasn't going to help. If he wanted his freedom back, he'd have to outsmart Karen in a way she would never see coming. And thanks to that little sticker on her windshield, he already had the first thread of her undoing. Daniel had been hopeful that by bringing the issue to the board in a professional way, they would see reason. Instead, what he found was a wall of bias so thick it was almost comical. The HOA board gathered in their usual community room, sipping coffee as if nothing serious was about to be discussed. Daniel presented his evidence: photos of the SUV blocking his driveway, logs of dates and times, and even Karen's dismissive comments. Before he could even finish, Karen, who sat at the center table like royalty, interrupted with a smug grin. "He's exaggerating. I only parked there once or twice, and that was for neighborhood safety meetings. Honestly, Daniel is just trying to stir up drama." The board members nodded along. One even said, "Karen has been a respected member here for years." "Daniel, perhaps you're taking this too personally." Taking it personally, Daniel thought. His property rights were being ignored, and yet they treated him like the problem. Then came the kicker. The board president leaned forward and declared, "Daniel, consider this an official warning. Complaints against Karen are wasting the HOA's time. If you persist, we may impose fines for harassment. Daniel nearly laughed at the absurdity. The victim was being threatened, while the offender was shielded. Karen sat back, arms folded, basking in her untouchable status. Neighbors who quietly supported Daniel avoided eye contact. Nobody wanted to cross Karen or her circle of influence. But as Daniel left the meeting, his frustration hardened into resolve. If the HOA was determined to protect Karen, then he would have to go around them. They wanted to play unfair? He would use the one thing they couldn't control, the law, because that sticker on her windshield wasn't just decoration. It was proof of something much bigger, and Daniel knew exactly how to use it. Daniel sat at his kitchen table that night, the HOA's warning letter still fresh in his hand. His mind wasn't on the paper, though. It was on that small, almost overlooked sticker sitting in the corner of Karen's windshield. Earlier, he'd noticed the emblem of a regional credit union, one that was notorious for being aggressive with delinquent loans. Daniel had once refinanced a work truck through them, so he knew their policies well. If a vehicle wasn't paid off, the bank technically retained ownership until the last cent was cleared. Curious, Daniel made a few discreet inquiries. A friend in the auto industry confirmed that Karen's SUV was, in fact, still under lien. She didn't own it free and clear. That meant if she was behind on payments, the bank could repossess it without warning. The realization lit a fire in Daniel's chest. Karen had paraded her SUV as a symbol of status, blocking his driveway like a throne she could park wherever she pleased. But beneath all that bravado, the vehicle wasn't even fully hers. Daniel chuckled at the irony. She had used it as a weapon against him, but it was a weapon balanced on shaky ground. One phone call could tilt. Daniel knew better than to confront Karen directly again. She thrived on drama, turning every dispute into a personal stage. This time, he wanted her to walk right into a trap she couldn't escape. He began by documenting everything with precision. Each morning, he filmed her SUV parked across his driveway. He captured timestamps, narrated the inconvenience it caused, and even caught her smirking as she strolled past him like she owned the neighborhood. Every detail was another nail in the coffin. Next, Daniel placed a discreet call to the credit union. He didn't reveal too much, but he asked about their lien enforcement policies on delinquent vehicles. As expected, they confirmed that if a borrower was behind, they had the right to seize the car immediately. Daniel didn't say Karen's name, but he didn't need to. He already knew enough to push the next domino. Then came his quiet masterpiece. One evening, as Karen bragged to neighbors about owning the nicest car on the block, Daniel casually mentioned within earshot, "Strange, that credit union still has a claim on it, doesn't it?" He let the words hang, smiling politely before walking away. The rumor spread like wildfire. Neighbors began whispering, some questioning if Karen was as wealthy and powerful as she pretended to be. Daniel didn't need to fuel it. Karen's arrogance did that for him. The more she tried to deny it, the more defensive she looked. Behind the scenes, Daniel kept feeding his evidence into the right channels. When the time came, the bank would see not just a delinquent borrower, but a pattern of misuse that justified swift action. And Karen, so sure she held all the cards, had no idea that the deck was already stacked against her. Soon, she wouldn't just be embarrassed, she'd be exposed. It happened on a quiet Saturday morning. Daniel was sipping coffee on his porch when the distant rumble of a tow truck echoed down the street. He didn't even need to look to know where it was headed. The credit union had finally acted. The tow truck slowed in front of Karen's driveway, its lights flashing in the early sun. The driver stepped out with paperwork in hand, calm and professional. Neighbors peeked through curtains and cracked open doors, curiosity sparking like wildfire. Karen, of course, burst out of her house the moment she heard the noise. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" she screeched, storming toward the truck. The driver didn't flinch. "Ma'am, this vehicle is still under lien. We've been authorized to repossess it. You'll need to step aside." Karen laughed nervously, trying to wave it off. "That's a mistake. I'm a respected member of the HOA. My car is fully paid." But the driver shook his head, holding up the documents. "Not according to the credit union. You're months behind." The crowd grew. Neighbors who had been quietly frustrated with Karen now whispered, some even smirking as the scene unfolded. For years she had thrown her weight around, acting untouchable. Now, in broad daylight, the truth was hooked up to a tow cable. Karen tried everything, shouting, calling board members, even threatening lawsuits. None of it mattered. Within minutes, the SUV's tires lifted off the pavement. The tow truck pulled away, leaving Karen red-faced and sputtering in her driveway. From his porch, Daniel gave a polite nod to the driver as he passed. For the first time in weeks, his driveway was clear. And for once, Karen was the one left powerless. But Daniel wasn't done yet. He had one last move to ensure she never pulled a stunt like this again. Karen's embarrassment should have been enough, but Daniel knew her type. She would try to spin the repossession as a misunderstanding, maybe even blame him. He wanted something that would make it impossible for her to claw back her self-made reputation. So, Daniel compiled every shred of evidence he had collected. The photos of her SUV blocking his driveway, the video logs with timestamps, her smug dismissals, and the HOA's dismissive warnings against him. He packaged it neatly and filed an official complaint, not with the HOA but with the county property office and the local magistrate. Property obstruction wasn't just an annoyance. In their county, it could be considered a violation with civil penalties. When the paperwork landed in the right hands, the result was swift. Karen was fined heavily for repeated obstruction of a private driveway. Worse for her, the HOA board that had defended her now had to answer awkward questions about why they ignored Daniel's legitimate complaints. Her allies on the board grew quiet, some even distancing themselves from her as whispers spread about her unpaid SUV and her misuse of power. For the neighborhood, it was a turning point. The woman who had strutted around like she was untouchable now avoided eye contact, her once boastful tone silenced. Daniel didn't celebrate loudly. He didn't need to. His victory was in the peace he reclaimed and the clear message he sent. Arrogance has limits, and even the most overbearing HOA, Karen couldn't bend the law forever. Standing on his porch with the morning sun rising over his now clear driveway, Daniel allowed himself a small smile. Karen had tried to bury him under rules and intimidation, but in the end, her downfall came from her own carelessness, and perhaps that's the lesson worth remembering. When pride blinds someone to reality, isn't it only a matter of time before consequences arrive at their door?